to get us started here a little bit. So I already said welcome to all. Let me say it again. Welcome. This is our 38th monthly webinar. Over 3 years we've been doing this. And just if you don't know, we have a website. I'll put it in the chat, the website information. We have a Twitter and we have a Facebook group page. And on our website, we archive all of our webinars. So all of our webinars are there. If you want to, scoot through and see what all we've done, we've covered a lot of different tentacles of the military-industrial complex. Before I introduce Kathy, I want to bring on Christian Sorensen, who's organized our February webinar, and so he can tell us about what's coming up next month. So, Christian, over to you.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brian, Paul, Kathy. You're all amazing. On Tuesday, February 25th at 8 o'clock Eastern U.S. time, we will be interviewing author and attorney Malaika Jebeli. She is an expert on the economic system. So we will be asking her questions about that, about her latest book, and what the economic system has to do with war. So the link will be in the chat to sign up for that. I'm personally very excited for this. Yeah. So I hope to see you all there. Tell your friends, and one love.
Thank you, Christian. And let me just give a plug for the book that Christian just mentioned. This is it right here. And it's a hoot. It's short, and it's got lots of illustrations in it. And it's not you, it's capitalism, why it's time to break up and how to move on. So, I mean, is it Malaika? She's brilliant and funny. And she gets right to the heart of the matter. Capitalism is at the root of imperialism and militarism and all of that, and she knows it. Anyway, it'll be a good one. So there's a little plug for the book.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you.
All right. I guess I will add also that we have March set up too. And in March, we're going to have Matt Kennard. Many of you may know he's the author of the book, The Racket, and I have his book right here too, The Racket. And his subtitle is A Rogue Reporter versus the American Empire. Matt is all over talk shows and YouTube. He's in London, he's British, and he is such an excellent reporter, and he's going to talk a little about neoliberalism and economics. That's the racket that leads to militarism. But he also is very strong about talking about the nature of the empire, the U.S. empire, and not just the U.S., but the Western empire and its machinations all around the world. So we'll have Matt. I think it's March 12th is when we'll have him. So, but tonight will be a little different. All over these webinars that we've been doing, we've been delving into all the different tentacles, of the military-industrial complex, the corporations themselves, State Department, the banking industry, universities, the media, all of that. But tonight is not about one of those tentacles. It's specifically about artists who are attempting to show us the nature of this beast and imagine a better world. And who better to do it than Kathy Kelly? And this is entirely her idea of how to go about doing a webinar. So I'm thrilled that this is going to be different. So Kathy, as many of you know, is a board president of World Beyond War and a co-coordinator of the Merchants of Death War Crimes Tribunal. Her protests against militarism have led her to war zones and prisons, and she believes children of war and those who are victims of violence have been her most important teachers. Since the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, she and an international network of activists have assisted over 100 young Afghans forced to flee their country. In 2024, she helped launch and develop a global solidarity for peace in Palestine network. So here's Kathy, whom many of us know and love. And Kathy, over to you.
Well, thank you, Ken. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be with everyone who has joined us tonight, and certainly to Ken and to Brian Garvey and Christian Sorensen and Paul Shannon. You fuel our efforts, all of you, because of your constant tireless work. And we need that. And of course, we also need the artists who help us to look at things from a different direction, to maybe think more about things we already believed, or maybe to start entertaining the possibility of believing something new. And I see just on the screen full of faces that there are artists with us, there are poets, and there are people who do sketches and cartoons and oil paintings, all manner of artwork. So I'm very grateful for that. And I sometimes am very challenged by new forms of art. And one that I just recently realized, that's pure art, happened in New York City in Times Square, when, as kind of a flash mob, a group of young and very athletic and very talented Palestinians danced their traditional dance, the dabke. And so I want to start with that very vigorous art form, and Brian has helped me to queue up the video. It doesn't last very long because the New York police interfere with it, but you'll see that on the video.
But everybody's racist against Palestinians. Everybody. You see the hub of the racists. All right, guys, we just finished doing dabke at Times Square. We had a good time up until the cops came and shut the music down. I believe they saw the kufiya on us and they saw Ana Ghazawi, and they completely shut us down. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. But everybody's racist against Palestinians. Everybody.
Well, thank you. Ana Ghazawi should never be considered to be a crime. But I wanted to move from that display of wonderful solidarity to my sharing of screen with a display of a cartoon that's become quite famous. And I actually learned a lot more about it myself while I was preparing for this webinar. So please indulge me for a moment while I hope I press the right buttons, okay? I know I want to share screen, go to PowerPoint, share. Oh, so that's it. You see that cartoon, right?
You got it, Kathy.
Ah, phew. All right. So this is a cartoon in which there's a lot of activity happening, no doubt. You see the being that doesn't really look very human with war on the back of the uh, protective vest. And then serving that being are quite a few waiters, and they're bringing cash on platters. And then you notice that very individualized, lonely, hungry people are at the various social services tables, healthcare, education, science, art. And when I think about the people who did the dabke dance, they were united, they had their arms around each other. And I wish that the people sitting at the table could kind of link arms, kind of think of Jesus turning over the tables in the temple, maybe. And, maybe we could have a little activity and they wouldn't be so beleaguered and so sad and so lonely. But I learned a lot more about this cartoon while preparing for the webinar, because I actually didn't know who was the cartoonist. And I Googled and Googled, and I finally came across, many of you will know this, but I didn't. The cartoonist is Russian. The cartoonist, Yuli Ganf, made this cartoon in 1953, and it was printed in a Russian comic magazine called Crocodile, and it was entitled "In America, dash dash, at this restaurant, only one person is served." So people in Russia in 1953 could understand that because the Americans were pouring their resources, and not just the Americans, but you see, the character with the knife has US dollars, and maybe that's kind of meant to be Harry Truman. And next to him, the character wearing the monocle might be Winston Churchill, and he's got British pounds. And then next to him, the character carrying all the cheeses is the French person, Monsieur Antoine Payan. And behind him, maybe from Germany, with a swastika, the Konrad Adenauer carrying the German money. And it all goes to war while the various social services suffer. Well, I think this cartoon certainly withstands the test of time. You know, you see the cobweb at the education table. The globe is surrounded by a cobweb, and the child's plate is empty, and obviously the globe hasn't spun for some time. And you see that the cello at the arts table is broken. It's a broken system. And I think this is an important cartoon for us to reckon with. Now, I want to give a sort of an acknowledgement that if any of you are linear thinkers and you like things to be chronological or organized, it's not going to work tonight. So please indulge me, because what I want to move to next is a slide that was sent to me by my very good friend Dave Martin. And it's in stark contrast to the gluttony and the almost obscene loading up of resources to war. And this is Dave's lithograph commemorating the people in Gaza today, whose bowls are empty, who are hungry, who are being collectively punished day after day in a genocidal warfare that the United States has provisioned. The United States still, as President Biden goes out the door, sending $8 billion more worth of weapons, while the infrastructure is destroyed, the water services are destroyed, the electricity is destroyed, homes, mosques, roads, buildings, destruction, monumental destruction. And so I'm very grateful to Dave Martin, and I asked Paul Shannon to put Dave's email in the chat. I think you might want to be in touch with him, and you could see other artwork he has created, again, commemorating the grief in Gaza. The incredible intelligence and fortitude, what the Palestinians often refer to as sumud, certainly, but then the loss, unmistakable, unbearable loss. Well, in the midst of all of that suffering and destruction and injustice and genocide, we have an incredibly iconic photo of Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, wearing his white coat, utterly unarmed, walking forward toward the two tanks. And such bravery. He was walking through rubble. He was walking through the Kamal Adwan hospital, where the ICU, the emergency room, the oxygen tanks, the electricity had all been made inoperable. You can see how the place is collapsing, burnt. There have been attacks on the hospital personnel, savage attacks, killing people in field executions. When the evacuation was ordered, people were given 15 minutes to get themselves out of the buildings. And Dr. Hussam Abu Safia is now in prison. He had to turn himself over to the Israeli authorities, and first they put him in a prison notorious for torturing prisoners. And then he was released from that into the Ofer prison, where his son says he's in critical condition because of torture. And his lawyers say he won't be able to speak to people until, at the earliest, February 22nd. And so we have the responsibility to try to hear from Dr. Hussam Abu Safia as best we can. But in a way, artists have already helped us along that way. I'm so grateful to David Solnit. He has arranged art builds and art projects all across the United States. And I want you please to look at this particular poster. And the young woman who is holding it is certainly advocating free Dr. Abu Safia and all abducted Palestinian healthcare workers. But do you see the image that those words are imposed on? There's Dr. Hussam Abu Safia walking through the rubble. And so I'm so, so impressed by what David Solnit has created. This is another one of his images, again, calling for freedom for Dr. Abu Safia, but also, and this is being taken to hospitals all across the United States. In Northampton, people have gone to the Mass Brigham Hospital. And if we were in Gaza, this hospital would be rubble. Every hospital in Gaza has been attacked. And when people are so much in need of healthcare because of dehydration caused by having poisonous water because of gastroenteritis, people who've been maimed, people who've been wounded badly, people whose bodies are rearranged by the 500-pound and 2,000-pound bombs that the United States has sent, people are desperate for healthcare. The doctors would be desperate to give it, but they've been attacked along with the journalists who would have wanted to tell their story. And so another iconic photo is that of Hind Rajab. This is the 5-year-old girl who loved to dress up as a princess. And Hind Rajab's family lived outside of Gaza City. They lived in an area called Tel Al-Hawa. And they got the order, evacuate. And so immediately, Hind's mother, Wissam, went with one of the older children on foot, and Hind got into a black Kia with her uncle and her aunt and 3 of her cousins, and they took off to try to find a safer spot. And already she was traveling with her cousin Layan as well, and Layan's father had initiated a call to the Palestinian Red Crescent organization saying, please help me understand where to go. And the Red Crescent people were going to try to coordinate his travel so they could take a safe road. And then suddenly there was an explosion and the car was hit. And when the Israelis fired on the car, there were only 2 survivors, Layan, age 15, and Hind, age 5. So the phone was still connected to the Red Crescent workers, and so they started to talk to the older girl, Layan, and say, okay, say your prayers, stay with us, tell us more about yourselves, don't panic, we'll send help. But with the humanitarian workers who had already been killed with the World Chef program, it was very, very clear to relief workers that if you didn't coordinate exactly where you were going with the Israeli military, you could be committing suicide if you just went driving out on the roads. And so it took 2 hours to get that coordination worked out. And an ambulance crew were finally within 860 feet of rescuing Hind. And by this time, her cousin, Layan, had already called out to the Red Crescent workers and said, I'm so scared. A tank is coming closer. And there was an explosion, and the phone line was cut, and Layan had been killed. So the Red Crescent workers called back, and they got Hind. And she said, please, I'm so scared. Please come to get me. And they said, someone's coming. But when the ambulance crew was so close to rescuing her, there was another tank-fired missile, and both of the crew members were killed. And these weapons were fired using a tank-fired missile manufactured by a subsidiary of the Day and Zimmerman weapon-making company based in Pennsylvania. It was 12 days before Hind's mother could go and collect her remains. Apparently, yet another tank-fired missile murdered Hind Rajab. And so at Columbia University, students took over Hamilton Hall And I think in an act of love, they flung this sheet out the window and renamed Hamilton's Hall Hind's Hall, with the cartoonist Banksy's illustrations. And that's a hall that had been taken over in 1968 by anti-Vietnam War protesters and renamed Mandela Hall. And I think these protesters were brave, and I think they were telling the truth, and they were trying to get their university to divulge how much money are you sending to Israel to help provision this killing spree? How much are we responsible for killing of people like little Hind? And the Hind Rajab Foundation continues to try to establish this kind of accountability. And Hind's image won't be forgotten. There are people all around the world, really, who are remembering her and other people killed in this terrible time of genocide. And so I asked Brian to cue up a video that comes from the north of Amsterdam. And it's an amazing mural, but you can't see a photo of it because it's so huge. So I think they maybe used a drone, but this is the video of that particular mural called the Palestine Wall. Thanks, Brian.
So we're standing here in front of the Palestine Solidarity Action mural in Amsterdam North, which has been created in solidarity with Gaza, but not just Gaza, for all Palestinians. I cover my face because this mural is not just created by the Palestine Solidarity Action. It is created by all of us, for all of us that are speaking up for Palestine. We see them, we see their suffering in Gaza. We wake up each day and we are seeing a live genocide streamed to our telephones each morning. And we are touched, but also horrified by the ongoing suffering in Gaza. This mural is a tribute to the journalists, medics, doctors, writers who have lost their lives and have risked everything to show the world and show us all life in Gaza and to show us their struggle. We have seen their humanity, and in turn we show them ours, and we show them our love.
Introducing the new Ego Power Plus two-stage.
Thank you so much, Brian. So Hind will be remembered, and there are so many other artistic remembrances, including a beautiful mural in Dublin. But I would like then to go next to another time in history, quite a long time ago, really. And this is taking us to, uh-oh.
And just to let you know, I did steal your screen share, so I'm gonna make you fool with buttons again. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I just need to pull it back up. Thank you, Brian. So this is a very famous painting that was created in 1565. We're going way back to the 16th century. And the painter is a man named Peter Bruegel. And he called it Massacre of the Innocents. Now notice once again, the military are clustered together. They almost seem like a big blob. But this painting details a pogrom in a Flemish village. And as art...
Kathy, I don't want to. I'm sorry, so sorry to interrupt you. We're just still not seeing it. So just try pulling it up once more. You know, technology and Zoom meetings.
I'm so sorry.
Bear with us. No problem. Everybody's patient
Okay.
here. We want to see it though.
I'm sure. I'm glad you told me.
Of
So
course.
this is where we need someone who's more adept than me.
Take your time, and if you can't make it work, I've got your backup. So give it one more
That's
shot.
true, you do. What I want to do is shrink what's on the screen in front of me so that I can hit share screen again. So if anybody knows how to tell me to shrink that screen. No?
Just one second.
Okay.
I'm pulling
You
up
know
that
what?
back.
I
Oh,
think
wait,
I've
you
got
made it
it.
work. Hey, there you
Okay.
go.
All right, now I just have to get to slideshow and from beginning, and then quick scroll through everywhere we've already been.
Perfect.
There we are. You
Beautiful.
all get Patron Saint of Patience awards. Thank you. So this is a painting by Peter Bruegel from 1565. And he was famous. And he was famous because he could put so much detail in a painting, and rich people really wanted to acquire these interesting paintings. And he often showed images of peasants. So I'm not sure why the rich people wanted to see more about the peasants' lives, but Peter Bruegel decided to let people know what a massacre looked like. So he based this painting on the biblical story about King Herod slaughtering all the little baby boys because he was so afraid that maybe someone might come and challenge King Herod's power. And this is a massacre of the innocents in a Flemish village when a pogrom occurs. And you know, that cluster of soldiers you see right in the middle of the painting, they at that time mounted on horseback with their spears, their weapons, they would be like the equivalent of F-35 aircraft today. Just, fearsome, extremely weaponized group. And they're chopping the heads off of babies. They're stealing infants from parents, pleading, saying, "Don't take my baby away from me." They're beating people up. They're breaking into people's homes. It's a scene of utter destruction. So when the Emperor Rudolph decided he'd like to get a Peter Bruegel painting for his palace, he wanted this one, but he thought, maybe my military won't like it that I make them look like they're a group of slaughterers. And, it's entitled The Massacre of the Innocents. So he had his court painters paint over, talk about propaganda, paint over the images so that instead of a soldier slaying a baby, it would look like the soldier was, ripping open a bag of flour. And instead of a soldier stealing a baby out of somebody's arms, the baby would be made to look like a pheasant. I mean, this whole painting was redone, but Peter Bruegel, the elder, had a son, and the son knew what his father's original looked like, and he restored the original. So I think today we have a lot of effort to coat over, to blind people, in a sense, forbid people to see the realities of war and make it seem as though wars are humanitarian wars. So that what the US military learned from the Vietnam War was don't let anybody come back in body bags. Don't show any images on the television screens that show the consequences of war. And if you can make it look like a humanitarian war, you've hit home base, a humanitarian war. So we have another instance of a very brave artist departing from the norms and showing what he really understood to be the consequence of war. In this case, it's Federico Goya. And he created the 3rd of May, 1808. Now, once again, you see the military people almost looking like a big arachnid, like a spider. You don't see their faces. And who is bathed in light, but the almost, raising out his arms as though he's like a Christ-like figure, the figure who's about to be executed. And at the time that Goya made this painting, often military people were painted as, people seated on horseback, looking very athletic and very noble and very attractive, but that's not what Goya does here. Your attraction is to the man about to be executed, and there's concern for the people already bloodied. Well, on the 2nd of May in Spain, Spanish loyalists had rebelled against Napoleonic forces. And so on the 3rd of May, hundreds of them, the insurrection didn't work, and hundreds of them were rounded up by Napoleon's forces, and they were executed on the spot. And so they were commemorated in this painting. And I think there's a common thread between Gauff's cartoon, Goya's painting, and Bruegel's painting, and that is that the military doesn't appear human. Now, I'm thinking we do always need to see the humanity, even of our enemy, and see ourselves as we're seen by the enemies. So I just pose that as something we always have to keep thinking about. But the next work of art is one that just grips me so much. That's a 10-year-old girl who is an Afghan child. And her parents had to flee from Afghanistan. They crossed an Afghan border into an area of Pakistan called Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And for some reason, a United States drone was told to perform surveillance over that compound that you see to the left of the screen. And for some reason, her family were identified as terrorists in this rural area of impoverished people. And a drone fired a missile that killed her parents and two of her siblings. So this little girl is an orphan and might have been totally forgotten. But this was in 2010, a group of artists decided that she won't be forgotten entirely because they created this enormous life-size image of her face and installed it in the field next to the compound where her family had lived. Now they took that face, they cropped the face from this photo, and there she is after her home has been destroyed. The two of the other surviving siblings with her have shrapnel from that destruction. But the artists, when they made this installation in 2014, entitled it Not a Bug Splat. Because you see, in military parlance, if a drone hits a target, then what the drone operator sees after that impact is kind of like an amoeba. It's the pool of blood radiating heat, and they say it looks like bug splat. And people that run away to the drone operators, it looked like squirts of water, so they call them squirters. And these artists entitled their artwork, Not a Bug Splat, and any drone operator that flies over that field will see the innocent face of this little girl. I got to know many, many people in Afghanistan. Sherry Morin is on this call, and she would remember with me the young Afghan peace volunteers who, many of them, under 12 years of age, and they were child laborers. And oh my God, they worked hard. They would be out selling tissue paper in the middle of the cold, or washing cars, or trying to shine shoes. Helping people weigh themselves, just, menial, often demeaning tasks. And when those little ones that were so cute got older, then they were often pulled into gangs or human trafficking. So it was a very precarious kind of life. But these little ones had gotten together with Ali, who is on the left, Ali Mazlumiar, and they adored him as their teacher. He taught them nonviolence classes once a week. And the Afghan peace volunteers who welcomed us taught these youngsters to become literate, taught them math and their language, Dari. And so little Sakina in the front has a yellow-handled hammer. And after she and her friends had collected as many toy guns as they could get their hands on, they just got every kid they had ever heard of or knew to donate plastic toy guns. And they broke them into plastic pieces. It's like a little plowshares action. Beat your swords into plowshares, your spears into pruning hooks. Well, they beat the toy guns into smithereens, and then they buried them, and then they planted a tree on top of the buried guns. And they did that again and again and again. I mean, that group planted thousands of trees across Afghanistan. I'm not saying there were plastic guns under all of them, but this was their commitment to a better environment. But my friends, the reality is that what's buried under the ground all across Afghanistan, mountainous grounds, fields, pastures, orchards, are the often contaminated, spent shells of so many weapons from so many different countries that either sold weapons to invaders or fired their own weapons. And that's the tragedy that Afghanistan must still cope with today, even as the United States created conditions which made it more likely that the Taliban could come to power because people were so wearied by the United States militarism. But shortly after that event happened, and I want to reiterate that a good, well-organized event is like a work of art. Aaron Hughes came to visit in Afghanistan. Aaron is part of the Iraq Veterans Against War and About phase, and Aaron had gotten to know the conditions afflicting people in Guantanamo through another friend who was an Iraq veteran. And he thought, how could we bring to light through our artwork what people in Guantanamo are facing? And so it's an amazing project that he conceived of. He and Amber Ginsberg decided to create a cup. They cast the cups in a factory outside of Manhattan, Kansas, and at the base of each cup is written the name of a prisoner who was in Guantanamo. And then depending on what country the prisoner was from, the national flower of that country is etched into the circumference sides of the cup. And it's a set of 225 cups, 20 of which Aaron bought to Afghanistan to help the young Afghans commemorate Afghans who had been tortured in Guantanamo. And Aaron would serve tea. Here he is serving tea at an event in the Chicago area, but he went all over the United States and to many different parts of the world, he and Amber, and they would serve tea and listen to people's stories. And my young Afghan peace volunteer friends were so taken by Aaron's willingness to listen to them. It meant a great deal to them. Catholic workers have often contrasted the works of war with the works of mercy, and John Amadon has done many, many artistic posters, but this is one set which I find enormously helpful. If we ask ourselves, what are the works of mercy? Well, you feed the hungry, clothe the naked, give drink to the thirsty, visit the imprisoned, care for the sick, bury the dead. And what are the works of war? We've seen it in Gaza day after day. We see it in Ukraine. We see it in Russia now. Destroy crops and land, seize food supplies, destroy homes, scatter families, contaminate water, imprison dissenters, inflict wounds and burns, and kill the living. And when I think about what gets destroyed, this is this picture of the exquisite architecture in Yemen. The Yemenis have every good reason to be utterly proud of their architecture, the history and the art that went into the building of every single home. These are homes in Sana'a. And when the United States says, oh, the United States attacked the Houthis, Israel attacked the Houthis, we have to say to ourselves, they're attacking civilians living in a place called Yemen. And these are children and women and families who depend for their infrastructure, for their food on the sites that are being bombed and the airports that are being bombed. And this has been going on year after year after year. And the majority of Yemeni people have meant us no harm. So my friend Sally Latch created for the Merchants of Death War Crimes Tribunal, which will host tomorrow morning for those of you who can get up for an 8 o'clock Central Time presentation. You'd be so welcome to join us as the verdict is rendered by jurors who, over a 3-year process, examined the evidence that people had collected, indicting the merchants of death of our time. And these are merchants who have sold horrific weaponry, causing so much bloodshed and destruction. And yet in Sally Latch's depiction here, where is the strength? Is it in the airplanes dropping bombs in the background, or is the greatest strength in the outraged woman? I think it's the latter. I do want to call attention to the Isaiah Wall in New York City. I see Mary Jelinek is with us, and she has stood in front of that wall and in front of the United States mission to the UN week after week after week, calling for an end to genocide in Gaza. And there have been so many protests that have happened at this wall. It's wonderful that the sunflowers are growing in front of it, and the injunction from the book of Isaiah is etched into the wall right across from the United Nations building. And that injunction begins with a biblical passage that asks the question, when shall come the day, when shall come the day when they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks? Nation shall not lift the sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any longer. Entrusted to us from the book of Isaiah. I wanted to put in one more cartoon because what upholds this evil system in which people can't learn how to live together without killing one another because, whereas maybe once people made weapons to enable people to fight wars, now we have to make wars in order to market the weapons. But what upholds this? Well, in this tiered cake, more or less, you've got capitalism at the top, and then the rulers upholding capitalism, and then the jurists and the teachers who fool the people below, and those who reinforce that because they are the militaries. And then there are those who live pretty well if they just eat, drink, and be merry. But who's holding up the whole edifice? The normal, everyday, ordinary workers, the normal people. We don't have to do that. We are many, they are few. So I wanted to move toward a closing by remembering a time that was extremely meaningful for people who were part of the Iraq peace team. You see Peggy Gish there and Jerry Zawada, Cynthia Banas. We were holding enlarged photos of some of the most beautiful children you could ever see. And we went down to the border. Across that barbed wire are the US soldiers. And we just begged them, don't invade. This was very shortly before the shock and awe invasion. And then there was a huge dust storm. We had gone down with our white plastic chairs to sit down there and fast. And I think we might have ended it a day or two early. I remember Mike Ferner was with us. I think he took that photo. But we went back to Baghdad, and the shock and awe bombing happened. It was shocking and it was awful. But when the Marines arrived, they saw these banners: courage for peace, not for war, no occupation, life is sacred, and then the enlarged photos of some of the most beautiful children you could ever see. And so in closing, I do want to also draw attention to this photograph of soldiers in World War I at Christmas time who climbed out of their trenches and shared cigarettes and little bits of booze or photographs or all kinds of ways to say we're human beings after they had shared songs, singing Christmas carols. So the soldiers are not to be blamed, but all of the merchants of death, I believe, are to be rehabilitated. I don't want to see anybody punished. I want people to be rehabilitated. I want myself to be rehabilitated, and always to find the strength to say, put an end to war. So I asked Brian to please cue up one more work of art. And this is a song that comes from Sarajevo. It's a chorale arrangement of Song for Sarajevo. Thank you.
Blood in all the streets, running like a flood. There's nowhere to hide, nowhere that I can go. I reach out my hand, touching death itself. Just a holy day in Sarajevo.
I can hear my heart pounding like a clock, hiding from the planes and from the bombing. Fire from the sky, burning down my life. There is no more love and no more longing. But when I close my eyes, I dream of peace. I dream of flowers on the hill. I dream I see my mother smiling. When I close my eyes, I dream of Once I had a home, once my life was good. Once my mother sang to me and held me. Then the fire came, falling from the sky. There was no one left who can protect me. Was a wicked bird that never comes to rest, feeding on the dreams of all the children. Was an evil bird flying in the dark. Every holy promise has been broken. But when I close my eyes, I dream of peace. I dream of flowers on the hill. I dream I see my mother smiling. When I close my eyes, I dream of Can't you stop the war? Bring it to a close. You are tall and strong and I am just a child. Can't we live in peace? Stop the flowing blood. Make a blessed world where I can be a child. When you close your eyes, do you dream of peace? Do you dream of flowers on the hill? Do you dream you see your mother smiling? When you close your eyes, do you dream of peace? When you close your eyes, do you dream of peace? Do you dream of flowers on the hill? Do you dream you see your mother smiling? Open up your eyes and give us
Over to you, Ken. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kathy, and let's just take a moment. Just take a moment of silence if you all feel like it. I'm so moved, and I know you all are too. So just a couple moments. Well, we're going to have a question and answer with Kathy. And thank you for sticking with us. And Kathy, thank you so much for that and for sticking with us. Before we do, as usual, we take a little break between Q&A and presentation. And this time we're going to bring Christian Sorensen back to talk about a mobilization that World Beyond War is doing. And as we said at the beginning, Kathy is actually the chair of the board of World Beyond War, so this is an appropriate thing to bring right now. So Christian, tell us about the action on February 23rd.
Awesome. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Kathy. That was wonderful. The perfect blend of like motivation, inspiration, and knowledge. That was really awesome. Yeah. So on Sunday, February 23rd, there is a global day of action to close bases. It is organized, as Ken said, by World Beyond War. And we encourage you to go to the link that we are putting in the chat. It is, if you're listening on a phone, it is worldbeyondwar.org/close bases. And on that link, at that link, you will see and learn about peaceful actions near you. These actions can be outside of a military installation or a recruiting center or a place like a local legislature where there is a deliberative body that can affect and even close the presence of the base or affect what goes on there. And yeah, so the link is incredibly informative. It has information on why and how military bases hurt us, the people, the public, including cost in terms of tax dollars, but also environmental damage and much, much more. The site has resources, it has graphics, so it's a wealth of information. I encourage you all to go there, sign up, find an action near you. If you don't see one near you, then you can register one. Find the base, do a quick internet search, find the base near you that's closest to you, or go down to your local legislature, do that, and enter that on the website as the place where you're going to protest peacefully. And the protests can be any diverse array of tactics. You can educate people, you can hand out flyers, you can hold signs. Again, the website has endless possibilities. Please go there, you wonderful people. Thank you very much. worldbeyondwar.org/close bases. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Christian. And Christian, you did mention to me at least that if you don't have a base near you, that World Beyond War is encouraging people to go to their legislative representatives as well. So that's an option for people too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, good, thanks. Okay, so how we do Q&A, many of you know because you've been with us for a while, is there's a reaction button in your browser for Zoom, and in there is a raise your hand button. So that's how we do it. You raise your hand, and I'll call on you, and you can ask Kathy a question, you can have a comment. I will encourage you to keep your comment short. Sometimes people go on a little long. So please keep them short and then give Kathy an opportunity to speak and see how many people we can get in. We're going to go for maybe another 15 or 20 minutes and see how it goes, see how much time we have and how many people we have that want to talk. So I see two people with their hands raised, and let's just do Grayson Trevor, it looks like. Please go ahead, Grayson.
Yes, thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. To keep my question very short, what does Kathy see as an alternative to the capitalist system that was driving the issues from the top, as she showed in her graphic?
Thank you, Grayson. I want to acknowledge that I'm not by any stretch an economist, but I think when we look at the gravity of the ecological collapse we're all facing worldwide, The idea of collaboration between countries, between scientists of different countries, of putting first and foremost the formation of sustainable communities seems to me to fly in the face of capitalism, which emphasizes, get what you can for yourself and get ahead and knock the others out of the way. So I think we need a far different model, one of collaboration, and then one which also says to the military, your day in the sun is over. We can't continue stuffing your coffers with our hard-earned resources. And I think the militarists have upheld the capitalists unwaveringly, and it doesn't defend anybody. Because when you look at the real threats we face, nuclear annihilation, ecological collapse, possibility of another pandemic, these are things that militarism actually exacerbates and fosters. So I think to challenge militarism, to seek ways in which communities deal with community problems and no longer entrust their problem solving to people whose major identifications quite often are with running to the bank with their portfolios stuffed after robbing other people blind. So these are just some of the thoughts I have. I strongly recommend, of course, reading Noam Chomsky assiduously, and the ZNet website has all kinds of creative ideas being posted all the time. Check out Michael Albert. And then I think what people do within their communities to care for one another is actually an antidote to capitalism.
Yeah, thanks. Let me plug again. Our next webinar actually will deal with this, how to deal with capitalism and what the alternatives are to it. So tune in next month. So Joanne Dufour, you're next.
Yes, Kathy, thank you so much. But I'm glancing over the people here, and I realize that there are a number of people in my area who aren't watching this. So my question to you is if we have a meeting coming up or a conference coming up, is it okay to show this? And is there a copyright, or is there some procedure I'm supposed to use to get permission?
Well, Joanne, it's certainly all right to show this, or give me a ring and I'll be glad to try to present it. And the more I practice, I might not get so tripped up. But the only problem I would see is that sometimes YouTube won't let you copy a video. So there might be a little bit of problem if you take a YouTube, but you just ask me and I can send you the PowerPoint. But really, I'd be more than happy to join a meeting. That's what keeps my fuel going.
Oh, that would be wonderful. I'm all excited. Thank you very much. Oh, do you have a contact?
Oh, I'll put that in the chat, okay?
Great, okay.
So Joanne, let me mention also that Mass Peace Action live streams this at the moment right on YouTube, and that's where the recording can be found. The recording of this whole webinar is on YouTube already, Mass Peace Action's YouTube channel, and I send the link out in a follow-up email within a couple days from this webinar to all the mailing lists that we have, and since you're here, you're on it. So you'll get the link to that recording as well, which you can show to other people.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yes, but the offer to come in person is irresistible. On Zoom.
Where do you live, Joanne?
In Washington State.
Oh, wonderful spot.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Thank you, Joanne. I see Mark. Is it Imlay? Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, I have 2 points to make. One is that in the Palestine area, there are a lot of areas where the Jews and Palestinians get along well together, and we need to use that as a model and expand it as part of the ceasefire. The other thing I wanted to say is about, like in my own field, in basic plant control, I send governments, et cetera, companies looking for a good company. I send them to typically Invasive Plant Control Incorporated because they are ethical. They are follow the standards. They don't just take money unless it's actually done in the environmentally sound way. And I want to say that in general, that we should be looking at companies. I'd say about 1/4 of them possibly are what we call good companies that are ethical. We need to find them and get the word out about them and support them, even if it costs a little more for somebody to use them. At least you know the work is ethical and done right.
Thank you, Mark, for both of those comments.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I'll let Alice Slater, please, go ahead, Alice.
Alice, you're muted. Alice,
Still need-
you're muted.
You should get a prompt that comes up on your screen asking you to unmute yourself. Well, I'll try and give you the prompt.
There you go.
You are.
Thanks. I couldn't do it myself, though. Anyway, whatever. I just thought about the dilemma about talking about capitalism, where we've been so brainwashed that you can't even talk about communism. You know, it's like, so I keep trying to use a new word like communalism or community, because we never really study what I mean, I don't think even the communists have communism, you know, like the idea of what it was supposed to be. So I'm just putting that out there as another way to talk about, say, communalism, you know, because we're going to have to work cooperatively in community. And it's very interesting. PBS did a documentary on how China eliminated poverty for 150,000 people, 150 million people in 10 years. And it was supposed to be on PBS. It was an American producer, and PBS refused to air it. Code Pink has been pushing it. But they show how it works at the community level, like how they organize, you know, with peasant farmers. And, you know, they had a meeting. They all sat in a circle to figure out how they're going to make money for the town. And it just went up to different levels till you get, you know, I mean, I think that we need some education on that, you know, what the alternative is.
Alice, could you say something about the doomsday clock and the kind of alternative? It's really, that's an artistic idea, isn't it? To look at something in a new way.
And somebody actually did a beautiful, we were talking about the, you know, the Bulletin is making this big deal about the doomsday clock. It's actually was thought about by Albert Einstein in 1947, that, you know, we're under this cloud of doom from nuclear annihilation, and then they keep setting the clock back or forth depending on progress on peace, or, you know, but now it's never been closer to doomsday. It's a minute and a half from midnight, 90 seconds to midnight, because of what's going on in the world. And at the best, it was 17 minutes to midnight when they stopped nuclear testing, you know, different things. So I was saying, this is like ridiculous. You know, we're talking about doomsday. What about a peace day? How do we get to peace? There were all the so we said we're going to do a peace day clock. And somebody actually, you know, like showing a Rosie going towards the dawn, and, you know, like we'll have different things that happen, like, you know, Trump calls Putin and says, let's talk. That puts the clock back 5 minutes from minute, you know, different things happen in the world, and the clock moves back, and we keep pushing it to peace. So we're brainstorming what it's going to look like.
Thank you, Alice. And I think the idea of paying reparations would be a great way to, you know, push that clock back and striving for.
Well, there's a lot of positive things that happen that we don't know about. Like Russia and China have been begging us for years to negotiate a treaty to keep weapons out of space.
Mm-hmm.
And we turned them down. We vetoed it. They put it in the UN and we vote against it. And then we don't know how the US is like that Pogo cartoon, We Met the Enemy and He Is Us, you know, in the 50s. But anyway, when Obama boasted with Israel how they knocked out the Iranian enrichment plant with the Stuxnet virus, they hacked Iran's enrichment plant. The New York Times actually wrote a story about this, that Putin called Obama and said, let's negotiate a cyber ban treaty. And we turned him down, you know, not to be able to hack. So these are the things that should go on the peace clock, like all the opportunities that we have. People don't know this. We only know that they're bad, they're making them horrible, and they're not. It's us. It's always us. As a matter of fact, I don't know who, I'm going on long, but Stalin asked Truman to turn the bomb over to the UN. When we did Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we were allies with Russia. We defeated Hitler together, the Nazis, and they were forming the United Nations. And Stalin was working with Truman. Roosevelt had died, and he said, turn the bomb over to the UN. And we said no. So Russia got the bomb. I mean, that's what it is. It's always us. Anyway.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Kathy. And a couple more hands up now. Mimi Goodwin. Go ahead, Mimi.
There we go. Thank you very much. As an artist, I feel this is how it is that I'm an artist, you know, just witnessing this. And it was such a powerful reminder of the legacy and how the arts are a part of movements for justice and peace. So what I'm wondering about, if you know of other people and organizations that are doing community art making as a part of this justice work, I'd be interested in hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you know, in Syracuse, New York, there's an art gallery that's called Outrage. Instead of outrage, they call it Outrage, and they always invite people to make presentations. And there's the Uri Icon Gallery in Chicago, which also features art, and it's a very small gallery, but they constantly invite the activists to come. Then I want to especially mention, I Googled David Solnit, S-O-L-N-I-T, and he's got many, many, many art builds that they do. He'll even, like, he traveled to New York City to help when people from Code Pink were going to different United Nations missions to the UN to help build the artwork that would help to, as you say, help people see things in a new way. Art is so incredibly helpful in that regard. Alice Slater just entered the Bread and Puppet Theater.
Yeah.
What a fine
Could
history there. Yeah.
Could you spell the place in Chicago, please?
Sure. URI space EICHEN.
Ooh, I was not even close. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi.
Oh,
Dr.
Dave
Whelan.
Martin, the People's Music Network, very important.
Hockey Whelan, go ahead.
Hi, friends. Hi, Kathy and Ken. I love this. Yeah, I'm sorry I was late getting on, but looking at this art was such a reminder that, as Alice was saying, we can't just get mired down. And so I think to encourage all of our comrades wherever we are, who are just feeling so despondent, so depressed, to say, make art. We've been singing a lot, and that really helps too. So all these expressions of artistry, all of this creative work. Just remember, what is that saying? The opposite of peace, the opposite of war is not peace. The opposite of war is creativity. So let's do it. And again, thank you for this very creative presentation tonight. So thank you both, and thank you all. I've loved seeing your beautiful faces here. I'll sign out.
Okay. Thank you. And, you know, your radio show certainly featured all kinds of artistic collectives and actions that were works of art in a sense. I also want to say a special thanks to Donald Smith. He's a professor who has put together songs and photographs and images, and I had thought I would be able to list them all in the chat, but Google or Zoom limits you to how much text you can put in a chat. So Donald is putting those in one by one. Thank you, Donald, for that. There's a poet that wants to say something there.
Yes, a poet. Thank you, Aki. Wonderful to see your face too. And yeah, speaking of poets, poet extraordinaire and co-founder, at least co-founder of Veterans for Peace, Doug Rawlings. Come on in here, Doug.
Oh, well, thank you. Of course, I have fond memories of Kathy Kelly being on a peace walk through Maine years and years and years ago. It was just really wonderful being with you. I would just recommend out of the state of Maine, Rob Shetterly's Americans Who Tell the Truth. 275 portraits of Americans who have told the truth, including Kathy Kelly is one of the portraits as well. So, and he had a showing in Syracuse at that institution in Syracuse for years. And he goes all around the country. He speaks to students. That's what his great focus. He's a wonderful presenter, and he's got what he calls the Samantha Smith Challenge. Samantha Smith was the 10, 11, 12-year-old girl from Maine who went to Russia and was killed in a plane crash when she was 13 years old. And so the Samantha Smith Challenge, he goes to various middle schools and has students draw up their own profiles and challenges them to work in their community like Samantha Smith did in her community. So Rob Shetterly, Americans Who Tell the Truth, he's got a wonderful website. I highly recommend it. So thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Doug. We can't thank Rob Shetterly enough.
Yeah, and I'll put in a plug for Doug too. Read his poems sometime. I don't know I should have asked you, Doug, where you find your poems. Maybe you can find them online. Find them on Veterans for Peace website, probably. And speaking of Rob Shetterly, it strikes me since you mentioned him, I know Rob. I knew him in Maine when I lived there, and he's been here to Asheville, and he is most wonderful, and his paintings are great. And we ought to have him here on a WIRN webinar, I think. I think he would be great to have and show his paintings and talk about his perspective. So thanks for that. Thanks for that nudge there, Doug. And now Cheryl Hogan. Hey, Cheryl, come on.
I'm trying to lower my hand there. Hi, Ken and Kathy. It's so nice to see you again, in spite of it being a little square on a screen. But our days with Witness Against Torture are very, very important to me. And interestingly, I just finished reading a book, which I think everyone would love to read, by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And maybe she wrote Braiding Sweetgrass, which many people have enjoyed. And she just wrote another book, tiny little book, called The Service Berry. Looks like this. It's only about 100 pages, small pages, beautifully illustrated. And really, it's a rant against capitalism, but it doesn't come off as a rant. It comes off as a how to live with nature and learn from nature. That nature can teach us how to live cooperatively, because that's what nature does. It's really worth looking for if you haven't already. And I think you would enjoy it too, Kathy.
Oh, I've had a chance to read parts of it, Cheryl, and you're right. It's just wonderful. It's wonderful to learn about how birds and bees with pollination do so much to do the kind of cross-fertilization that keeps everybody full. And I love the story about the hunter who was asked by an anthropologist, how come you went on that hunt and you got a big kill of meat and you gave it all away. And he said, yeah, I store my food in my neighbor's belly.
Yeah. So the book's full of things like that, and it's really lovely. And it's not just the bees, and it's the trees, and it's the birds, and how everything interacts. And we can do that too. We can really learn how to do that.
Mm-hmm. And thank you, Cheryl, for all of the Witness Against Torture. That every one of those actions was a work of art, I felt.
Yeah, and building community. Yeah,
lucky. very much a part of it.
I will add that you should go to the website for Witness Against Torture. They just had January 11th, every January 11th, which was the opening of Guantanamo. They are active in Washington, D.C., and now around the country, people do actions all over. And if you go there, what you may recognize the fact that they're the people in the orange jumpsuits and the black hoods walking around town in Washington, D.C. And yeah, it's pretty beautiful and striking to see that. I was part of it. Kathy's been part of that. Cheryl is, and yeah, if you don't know about them, go check them out.
There's also an opportunity to help accompany people who've been released. You know, a lot of them are kind of bereft, and so it's a good possibility to be buddies in a sense, and pay reparation.
Something like, what is it, 15 people still in Guantanamo, Muslim men still in Guantanamo, yeah. So it's not over. Yeah. So we've been at it for about an hour and 20 minutes. That's a long time. And I don't see any more hands anyway. So let's wrap it up. And it's been a beautiful evening. And Kathy, do you have before we close, do you have any last thing you want to impart to us all?
Well, it's quite cold here in Chicago. So I'd like to just quote Barbara Deming. She was a wonderful Quaker civil rights activist, women's rights activist, anti-war activist, and she just had a very brief poem, Locked in Winter, Summer Lies, Gather your bones together, rise. Thank you, all of you.
Good way to end. Good night, you all. Thank you for being here. God bless you all, and keep working for peace.